All right, everyone, thank you so much for so many people attending. Really appreciate it. So maybe some people know the concept of satsang. Satsang is where people can ask questions and we just allow it to flow in whichever ways it flows. Let's see how long this takes. For now, the flowing is listening to the espresso machine. So a little bit of background information. So I see this talk like for maybe 15 minutes. I share a little bit of a background story. And there's two elements that are going to be discussed, or at least that's the plan. That is about how awakening happens and pranic living, which are two things that are not intertwined, but they can often occur together. There's many people that are able to live off prana, although the self hasn't dropped away, and there's many people where the self has dropped away, but they just eat regularly. So I'll first start with a little bit of background story. Later on, we'll open it up for questions and answers. The only thing during the questions, sometimes I've noticed this many years when I was visiting a lot of gurus, is you have a question in your mind. Actually phrasing it correctly in your mind probably answers half of the question. So if someone has a question, like think of it and make sure that you can say it in half a minute. If it's longer than that, you need to process it better in your mind, because unless the question is really clear for you, you will not get the right answer that you need. So a little bit of background story. So I have a totally different background than you. What you might think, I'm a real geek. I'm an engineer. I worked for 10 years in mostly on and off in China, optimizing factories. Until at a certain moment I had tagged off everything from the list that life tells you what it is you need to be happy. So I had this beautiful relationship, beautiful girlfriend, beautiful house, more money I could spend than I could spend healthy traveling for work. So you'd be happy, right? So I walked past the mirror and I looked at my own image and I was like, then why do you look pissed off? And that was the first step in which everything started to crumble down. A good friend of mine said, after I quit my job, quit the relationship, moved out, you should do a 10-day Vipassana retreat, which is 10 days of silence, sitting in meditation. You're not looking at everyone. You're just 10 days observing whatever is going on in your body, which is quite extreme. I did some meditation before, but the regular stuff. In the first 4 days, non-stop, I heard my own voice saying, dude, you should go home, meditate for 2 hours and work for 10 hours, then at least you get something done. And I realized how dysfunctional this thought was, but there was at the same time this split in my psyche, so I could see my own thoughts the entire time and realize, okay, if I follow this voice for the rest of my life, I'm a slave to it. And I realized it's not just my voice, but it's the voice of the entire society. Because what you say to one another when you meet each other, like, how you doing? Yeah, busy. As if busy is a barometer for how much you're worth. And if you would say, like, well, I'm not doing actually all that much, people are like, what are you, like a leash to society? Come on, we have to do stuff and things. So it pissed me off. It's like, why can't I just simply be? Why do I need to do all the time? And it started out with, after that, those 10 days, just sitting on the couch, and I let my phone rest just a little bit out of hand reach. And every time I had this desire to grab for my phone, to get some sort of dopamine hit, to not feel whatever I was feeling, I would stop. Like, what is it? What kind of unrest is here? What is it focused on? What is it based on? At first I couldn't really describe it, but after a while I could maybe link it to certain things. And it's quite intense to do that, but at the same time it was very liberating, because there was such a split between this automatic pattern of what we've been taught and what I was. I lived next to the park and I thought, well, I might as well just continue on doing this. I was working as a freelance engineer. I just thought, okay, I'm not going to take any work for now. I'm going to sit on park benches and walk in the park and maybe throughout the city. Those 2 weeks turned into 2 months, and those 2 months turned into well over a year where I did nothing else than simply become okay with being, which is an enormous weight to let go of. In that year, bizarre things happened. We're in a group which talks about synchronicities and things. Well, I can tell you stories which are like impossible to believe. But I got such a trust in life because I didn't have any income. And every month it would be like, yeah, I'm going to pay rent. And at last, always something would happen. Like, oh, could you take one picture of me? And then it's like, oh, no, it's more, this is enough. And it's like, really? Cool, I can pay rent. Being totally with whatever arises creates such a liberation, and in bizarre states happened where I could look at a leaf and I'd have tears in my eyes just flowing and flowing and flowing. And then I'd see someone walk up in the corner of my eyes, like, okay, if someone sees this, I'm definitely going straight into a straitjacket. So there was this balance between doing this in the city and not somewhere in Nepal in the mountains. The only social interactions I had was with 3 friends. All other friends kind of dropped, and I did salsa dancing like once every 2 weeks in the evening, but you don't have to talk there, so that's good. That year, apart from crazy beautiful states, something else started to happen. And it has happened many times, maybe 50 times ever since, sometimes for a few seconds, sometimes lasting up to 45 minutes, where, where there's this sense of a contraction in your chest or maybe in your throat or your head that gives this rise to, well, I'm here and this is the outside world. And to a certain extent, everyone knows that this can fall away or become lighter. Whenever you're in love, don't you feel like the boundaries are kind of dissolving? When you watch a beautiful sunset, it's never like, I'm watching a beautiful sunset. Like, that doesn't happen. You're like merging with the beautiful scene. In this sense, the observer and the observed, they fall away, they become one. And in those instances, it's absolutely clear what you are. That's why we love beauty. That's why we love love. That's why we love truth. Also, when you are like vexed with a problem and suddenly it hits you. Suddenly there's silence, there's emptiness, like, this is it. So, ever since, this is now 7 years ago, when I sat in the park, these moments arise, where the center that's felt here, that gives rise to I'm here and this is the outside world, it just simply fell away. Life just continued in the same way, but it's absolutely clear in those instances that there's no such thing as time, that there's no such thing as space, that even the concept of I am makes no sense whatsoever. And what it did was it really broke down the concept of what it is to be me. Of course, we always, like, okay, if you say to someone, who are you? Like, you say your name and your job and maybe your family life. But these are all stories added up on. Once it falls away, and you've all had this. So when you're in love, everything is just flowing and it's all nice, and you don't have this sense of separation. While the opposite is maybe someone threatens you or scolds you, and then you're like this contraction really strongly in the chest. So this openness resulted in a lot of insight, and at a certain moment I decided, okay, I've become so comfortable at becoming the observer of life. And even though those instances where the self dropped away, it was clear that everything was me, if I could even refer to it as me. It's just, I used to refer to it as, there's just one dance of being. There's simply this what arises. But when those instances were not there, I do self-inquiry, which is the Vedantic path, Advaita Vedanta, where you ask, who am I? And a common sentence is neti neti. So I'm not this. I'm not my thoughts because I observe my thoughts. I'm not my emotions. Those are observed also. I'm not my body. My body changes. So what is it I am? Well, instead of saying what you are, because then it becomes a new concept, you just sweep the floor until everything that might be you is gone and what you are remains. Well, that's the first step. It's called enlightened duality, because then it's clear that you are the observer of everything that occurs. And it is a beautiful safe house, because we are so used to being totally absorbed in the world of form, as I call it, that diving into the world of formless, that which underlies everything, the substratum that allows for everything to be, is like a comfort zone, it's a safe zone. Maybe some people have heard of Shiva and Shakti, the two different aspects, right? So Shiva is the masculine aspect, the destroyer, complete emptiness. I remember as a young child, maybe I was like 8 or something, I was lying in the garden, looking upstairs at the stars, and I realized like, oh, there's only two things. There's energy and absence of energy. And then it was only later on that I realized, well, that absence of energy, that Shiva, that masculine aspect, it has pure potential. It can allow for anything to be. And the feminine aspect, Shakti, can take up any form, can birth any form. So I got so comfortable in being the observer, the Shiva aspect, that I felt a little bit detached. Nothing could hurt me. It was just, I'm that in which everything happens. So I wanted to dive back into life again, and then I decided, well, for 10 years straight, every year, someone would call me, and if I could photograph their wedding. It's like, why not try this for 1 year full time? And it completely exploded, because it arose out of not a fear mentality, not this normal contraction that we have, that is just a normal automatic reaction we have because we feel limited, we feel scared, we need to provide, we need to make sure that we're safe. But once you see that you and life are not two, nothing can hurt you. So out of that place, something can arise which is aligned with the greater. And I didn't do anything to make it succeed. But within the first year, I shot 22 weddings, and someone recommended me should participate in awards, and I ended up in the top 10 of the world in my first year of wedding photography full time. And 2 years later, I was voted, it's just one of the awards, as International Wedding Photographer of the Year. And it's so bizarre, because I would have colleagues who'd done this for 20 years, it's like, where the hell does this guy come from? And I felt that there was something wrong with me, because I would get all these awards and I couldn't feel pride. I can't feel shame either, but it's weird. It can be a bit lonely, since I didn't have anyone who had gone through the same thing. But it's beautiful to see that once you and life are no longer two, life just flows whatever way it's supposed to flow. So for many years I kept silent on this, just a few friends knew about it, and I felt that there was still, it hadn't really been completed yet, because I held on to these moments where the center fell away, and I saw it as a bit more than the regular moments when the center is here. It was only half a year ago when a dear friend of mine, I saw a video on YouTube, and she lived off prana, and I was looking into that also. And she had from first glimpse to awakening, it was very fast in 1 year. So it's very turmoilish if this happens. Her total life got turned upside down. And we went to talk, and she said, "Marnix, do you still feel a seeking energy?" I said, "Well, I can't find any seeking energy. It's all good. Even the concept of enlightenment, I couldn't care less. I'm just happy." And we went to do ecstatic dance that night, and I felt something happening here, some Kundalini energy moving. And it was the day after that I started doing a Kundalini activation facilitator training, which is a very passive way. Maybe everyone has heard now about the word Kundalini, but it's there's Kundalini yoga, where you do a lot of breath work, visualization, and all these kind of things. But I've always strained away from anything which can be interrupted by the ego, by something that wants that has the seeking behavior. So I do a Kundalini type, which is people just lie down, and it opens up, and people start shaking, and the system knows how to realign itself. It was during the first day of this training that I felt something move. I went to bed that night, and I realized just before I fell asleep that those instances where the center falls away, that there's complete merging with whatever is, and the other moments where there is this center, that I just held on just a little bit, like, yeah, I find those more important. And I was actually surprised about, like, so there's still some seeking behavior there. And then I went to sleep, and at 3 o'clock at night I woke up, and for 45 minutes straight I was laughing hysterically. I even made a video about it. I have to record this. And it was the last seeking energy that fell away, because it was seen that even those instances where there is no center and instances where there is a center, the essence is the same. It all comes down to the same thing, which is there's only one ingredient out of which everything is made, and it's knowing. If you can say anything, I love this analogy that Rupert Spira often uses. When you have a dream at night, maybe you're walking in Paris along the Seine, and you see the Rotterdam with a friend, and you wake up in the morning and say, it was just a dream, it all happened in my mind. But yet, you wake up and you realize, well, in the dream, I felt to be me. And my friends, the Seine, Paris, the Notre Dame, they were all other than me. Well, if that is the case, what evidence is there that this is not similar? And I have not been able to find any evidence that this is the case. Now, it's not evidence that it is the case, but I feel that this is how I live my life more and more. So that's the first aspect I wanted to discuss, and the second aspect is pranic living. I have this strong voice often just coming up, and it's like, okay, when I hear that voice, I need to listen. I was listening to a YouTube video of a guy talking about pranic living, which essentially means that you have sun gazers, you have breatharians, and they substitute eating for doing breath work or looking into the sun. But you also have pranic living, where the energy is gotten directly out of the ether. And I heard this guy talking about it, but he didn't vibe with me, so I clicked on next video, and this guy comes up, and he has like a little bit of Dutch accent. It's like, okay, this is funny. And so he lives 15 kilometers away from me, so I got in contact with him, and he taught me how to switch to living off prana. And for now, it's not complete yet. I've been on it for 14 months, but I think I usually eat like Saturday and Sunday, and sometimes longer, no periods. I think it's like 80% there or something. I don't know. I still drink water. He doesn't drink. He doesn't eat. The longest period he didn't eat and drink was 5.5 months, and it's all good. I mean, he's like a big motherfucker. It's like he used to be skinnier than me, and then at a certain moment when everything had transitioned, he realized like, no, I can have any shape I want. And he said, I just want to be more bulkier, more massive, more muscles. He used to be a bodybuilder before he started all this. And within half a year, he had gained 15 kilos of muscle. So I might be the odd one out in a regular bunch, but among my friends, I'm like the normal guy because I have a lot of weird friends that do this kind of stuff. So for this, I'd like to just open it up for questions, and maybe some meditation comes out of it, some practice where I help you dive into your essence in what you truly are, because we can just keep it like a mental thing, but it doesn't help anyone because you just get pulled back into life. So how can you stay amidst this understanding, but experiential understanding amidst of life? That's my goal.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. You sent me into a little trance. I could feel your pain, what you were going through. It resonated so deeply. Seeing you winning awards, you felt nothing, and the pain you felt, like relationships, and people around you, and everything. It's like I kind of lived that, and I love that you're able to find methods to kind of change, grow, and be who you are now. That's amazing. But I raised my hand because I want you to do the cap on us, if you could. That would be so awesome.
Sorry, you have to help me with the expression, the cap. What does it mean?
Your Kundalini activation process.
Oh, right, the cap. Yeah, right, yeah. So cap is Kundalini activation process. There's different types of it. I might be willing to do like a group session. It's complete surrender. So the Kundalini energy is more like the feminine energy, receptivity. And that's why I don't want to mix it with the masculine energy that says, okay, I want to achieve this, because often when a thought comes to mind, like, I'd like to do this in the future and achieve this, then there's like laughter inside. It's like, and it's so clear, like, whatever the little me can come up with, it's just like a hindrance to whatever God could give you. It's like, really, you want that? Like, okay, you could have got like a lot more, but so... Similarly with this, Kundalini, it's complete surrender, so people just lie down. Some people don't feel anything, but most people do, and sometimes people start shaking all over. First time I saw it, I was like, okay, this is just fake, because the facilitators do all sorts of movements, which are totally unnecessary, I don't do them. And people start shaking all over. But then, the first session I did, I was like, okay, yeah, I feel something moving in my shoulder, and it starts shaking. It's like, okay, I'll allow it. And then the second session, I was standing on my neck for 25 minutes, doing all sorts of movement and doing all sorts of weird sounds. I was like, yeah, it needs to come out, so I might as well do it. Bizarre things have happened in those sessions. People like completely lose all fear of flying, or suddenly realize, and days after that, normally at work, people walk all over them and they just set a boundary like, no, this is it. And they're like, did I do that? Like, yeah. So the system knows, it has an innate intelligence. It has been beating your heart all your life without you having to consciously think about it. Just trust that. That's the only thing in those sessions I say, like, whenever the monkey mind comes up with, well, am I just making this up, or just allow it to be, and whatever needs to come up will arise.
And the last thing is thank you for shattering my judgment, which is, I see you and I'm like, oh, he doesn't even know the person you look at. And it's such a biased, horrible way of thinking, so thank you for doing that. That's the way about your friend that you got that way and got big. Love it. Thank you.
Thanks so much. No, the word, it's been coming up a lot, judgment, this last week. I see it in a different way. If you say that judgment is what's an obstacle to true love, then you've mistaken it, because then you're judging the fact that you're judging, which is more of the same. Judgment can come up, hate can come up, love can come up. My company is called Unconditional Attention, because that is actually a description I find for true love. When people say love, it's often intermingled with, well, it's opposite of hate, right? Or opposite of judgment. No. Anything can still happen. Like, we've seen great sages in the past, like Nisargadatta Maharaj, who, after the self fell away, kept on smoking a package every day and was swearing, and he was not a nice guy. But it was clear that, he came from a place of clarity, and a lot of people have benefited from his teachings. So judgments still come up, but the story around it has fallen away. So similarly with self-esteem, of course it's better to have good self-esteem than low self-esteem, or high self-esteem better than low self-esteem, but it's still a double-edged sword. When you have high self-esteem, you live with an image of, I am good at X, maybe you're good at playing the piano. And then you have a day where you're a little bit off tune, or it's not going well, and then reality doesn't match up with your story, and now you're pissed off. I was like, you come up with excuses, well, the piano is false, or I had a bad sleep, and it's because my neighbor did this, or whatever. But that's just an automatic pattern. These thoughts, they just happen. It's a preservation mechanism. Any energy that is in a certain vibration wants to stay in that vibration. We've all seen this the last few years. You have freaking intelligent people that are in a fear mentality, and they'll just use their intelligence to come up with rationalizations why the fear is justified. And you can give them all the scientific data that it's unjustified. They just come up with more brilliant ideas why it is justified. So, intelligence in the name of pain causes world wars. Intelligence in the name of love creates the beautiful new world. Now, neither is good or bad, so that's again something. It's like, oh, we need to create the new world. Like, no, not really. We talk about the position of all the planets. At a certain moment, life wanted to experience more duality, more suffering, more pain. And now we're coming around, and it's growing towards more unity consciousness. And it has its growing pains every time we switch. But that's simply what is happening. There is no good and evil in that sense, because you cannot have the good without the evil. How would you know if everything is just dandy? Like, you know this, like you have kids that are growing up in a palace, and they get everything and everything and everything. And they're never happy. And they come out in the real world, and then it's like, so you need the balance. And we talk about the Akashic records, that like everything is stored. So we need to go through pain in order to really fully enjoy the blessings and the beauty of life.
I don't even have a question. I just want to say, like, bro, you have me in a trance, and like your ability to make a presentation without any presenting, and just fucking like, dude, I just wanted to tell you that, like, and I think it's your truth that it is, but really, I just wanted to say thank you for that, and you, and yeah, you know, and yo, you started this shit. That was so ill. Like, mic drop. You were like, listen, if your question is not less than 30 seconds, you reframe that shit because you probably got something else going on. I literally was just like, bro. It was so cool, but I just wanted to say, man, you know, not to put anything next to anything or whatever, but this might have been like my personal, I felt like the most moving presentation that I've seen. And so I just want to say thank you for fucking being you, bro.
Thank you. Thank you, bro. I know I notice when you, like one of the biggest fears of people is speaking in public, right? So it was like 7 years ago, I felt like I need to tackle that one. So I did Toastmasters, I don't know if you know it, but now you like speaking in public was just embarrassing because I pre-planned every speech, and then you get in your head like, well, if I misspeak now, then I forget my entire lines, and you get nervous. And then it's like, okay, so later on I just decided, okay, is this topic? What kind of words do you want to use? What kind of topics? Okay, that's it. And I just start talking, and it's like, oh, that's how you do it.
Yeah, thank you. It's really beautiful and inspiring. Obviously, we spoke in the last couple of days about living off prana. I have an idea that it's the source of everything, right? How do you, as a creative, how do you tap into that source? I mean, you're also a creative, so I know that, but how do you balance yourself? For instance, if you do a wedding, do you meditate before, or how do you get into that state of flow? Thank you.
Yes, so the state of flow is quite interesting, right? Because everyone knows that when you're in the state of flow, there's no concept of self, like everything just goes automatically. Like a great basketball player, like doing his thing, and then he scores, and then afterwards it's like, yeah, I did that. But during the entire movement, he wasn't there. So no, I don't really meditate anymore because it feels as if anything is meditation. However, I do sit still every once in a while and just love to sink into the energy. I think that's the interesting thing, because even in the first year of doing full-time wedding photography, the part of the ego that still remained, it was like, yeah, I can't take credit for that, because it's because Marnix the photographer wasn't there. That's why the good shots came. Every time Marnix the photographer came back, it was like, shit. Sorry for those wedding couples. So there's a few things I used to say in that year in the park whenever I realized that the mind chatter came in and it kind of took me over. One sentence I really love is just this. Just this. No future, no past, no story. Just this. Just this. And what that does is it's like a fuse, an electrical fuse. When you have like too much current flowing, it hits it, right? So make sure that it doesn't explode. It's a similar thing in the mind. Like whenever the mind goes, it's like, just this, just this. And by just this, I mean no need for the past, no need for the future, no need for a story. Just be with this. So how do I find myself? I find myself with adrenaline pumping through my blood, or nervousness, or my camera breaking down. Okay. From that space, what needs to be done? So this is a sentence I use often. Whenever I feel I'm getting out of that, just this. No future, no past, no story. And another sentence I often used was, what part of this am I? So for this, yeah, it might be nice to dive into that. I'd like for you to come up with reasons. Maybe someone is interested in doing this. Why you feel you are the body and the mind and the thoughts. So we can dive into that and break it down. Because I think that would be beneficial. So if someone feels like, okay, fine. We'll go into that.
Any volunteers?
No need? Okay, well, we'll do it in general then, that's fine. So, there is this element in you that from a 5 years old, 12 years old, 18 years old, now, the day you leave this physical body, which is unwavering, unchanging. That you've always said, yeah, that's me. That's not different from when you were really young. And this element is that Shiva aspect, the Shiva, the destroyer, the masculine, the complete emptiness which allows for anything to be. So from that spot it's clear that you are not your thoughts, they arise. From that spot it's clear that you're not your emotions, they arise, but you are the emptiness behind it. Your body changes multiple times. You might lose an arm, you might lose an ear. Still alive, you're still there. So that what you are cannot die, because it's the absence of anything that can die. Just like the analogy of the dream, there is this substratum, the masculine, which allows for the feminine to be. Now, once you are established fully, or at least to a large degree, in this Shiva aspect, then it's nice to dive in fully into the Shakti aspect. I've noticed that there are quite a few teachers that like to stay in the safe zone of the Shiva. It's like, oh no, I'm the observer, I can't be touched. But it's like a bit of a pity, because we're experiencing this in the human form. You might as well fully embody it, enjoy it. And then you are able to hold the duality of being both whatever arises and that in which everything arises. So it's, as Ramana Maharshi said, he used to refer to it as I, the small I and the big I. So yes, life is viewed through this persona called Marnix. I interact, I have my irritations, I have my personality, but at the same time it's clear that if I'm speaking to someone, that they are not different from me, because they arise in the same emptiness. And so if you close your eyes, and most of you already have, if you close your eyes and you hear this voice, where do you hear this voice? you might come up with bullshit story like, yeah, it's coming out of the speakers, but no, really, where do you hear this voice? It's in you. Where do you feel the sensation of your butt on the couch? Yeah, at the edge of my butt, yeah. But where does that happen? It all arises in this emptiness, this unwavering, unchanging emptiness that allows for anything to be. Any sensation, any thought, any emotion, it's coming from this, out of this. It's the feminine birthing anything out of the complete emptiness of the masculine. And that's what is meant when people refer to like all is one. But like I said yesterday evening, that's a shortcoming. It's logical that people say this, but the true, which isn't even true because you cannot point to it truly, but a better description is non-duality, not two. I can't even say it's one, because one would happen amidst something, like amidst emptiness, but it's this merger of this masculine and feminine energy. There's just this, whatever arises, this beautiful dance of being one, beautiful expression of life. That is what you are. And even if that isn't completely your experience from day to day, living as such will draw you closer and closer to it. Before you know it, you are really embracing the paradise on earth. Because what happens when the story of me falls away? You find yourself just the way you are. Maybe you're pissed off, maybe you're happy. But that's just the way it is. Why would you fight whatever arises? It's stupid. How could you fight whatever is currently happening? Now, it doesn't mean that if I'm stuck in the mud, I don't climb out. But why fight the fact that in this moment I'm stuck in the mud? You lose so much energy by just, and this is why the Buddha said it's simply the end of suffering. Enlightenment, to demystify it completely, it's simply losing this story that says this isn't good enough. Because it cannot be anything else than what it currently is. So you might as well stop judging it, it simply is. And in a sense, when this story of self drops, you fall in love with yourself. And the self is God. And that's what many Sufi mystics have talked about, to say, when the journey to God has finished, the journey into God continues on and on. It's sometimes a little bit overwhelming. And I'm glad I'm not in that state all the time, because I would not be able to function. I often have that I walk across the street and just have this so much radiance and happiness. Because it's, I mean, even if you want to look at it logically, I mean, come on, who comes up with this shit? We're like in a human form on a spinning planet, going around other planets, and we build cars, and we're talking in a microphone, and there's other people, and some piss us off. And really? You come up with this shit? It's beautiful. Just the fact of being able to experience this is Satchitananda. It's knowing being bliss. So if anyone has any question, please.
I don't know what you're saying, but it's not going to make me go crazy.
Sorry?
Well transmitted.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
I was inclined to say when you were, I was like, no, there's no questions to be asked. It's like answered everything in.
Thank you. Drop these nuggets, it's just like fire something in me. It's like, oh yeah, this is I'm suffering. It's like simple truth. You said it's laugh about it. It's like everything's
So realistic what we just talked about.
Yeah.
Everything about the dreaming.
seriously. It's like
Just dropped in on something similar.
it's like an intense 10-day. Wow.
You remind me of like, well, I've never experienced one, but like a mystic, one of those like mystic, and you just so like, I was like, damn, this is what it must seem like when someone just like embodies that. So just,
Yeah, dude. I don't know if I just walk, but float.
Well, actually, it's funny that you talk about it, because that ties into, there's multiple ways that's been talked about reaching enlightenment. Like, you can't really reach it, but okay. And one is through the chakra system. And that's been talked about lately, of course, a lot because of the pyramids, and we've all had this shirt with the chakras on it. For me, I've always refrained from anything to do with chakras, Kundalini energy, Tantra, psychedelics. I knew it wasn't my path. For me, it was pure jnana yoga, which is through wisdom, through clarity. And once I was established enough in that, I could allow for these other energies to play with it, because I didn't have the fear anymore of losing myself in it. And I've seen this a lot. I've been in various places where, like, bhakti yoga is devotional, so you'll see like people really hugging and touching the feet of masters. And I know this bhakti energy, it's beautiful, your heart chakra opens up and it's just like, whoa, love. But it's very addictive. Similarly with Kundalini energy. If you play with that shit and your system isn't ready, you can really fuck yourself up. Like people end up in psychiatry wards. Psychedelics, they have a beautiful tendency to open up what's possible. But sometimes you hear people who have had 60 ayahuasca trips, and it's like, well, you might want to check out if that's not your new addiction. So we talk about cities. Cities is like the special powers that everyone has. I love this story of a master who lived near the Ganga River, and one of his disciples went away for 20 years. And this master was a very jnana yoga, so very much like self-inquiry, like what I was doing. And this disciple came back after 20 years, and he had meditated long and did a lot of work on himself to make sure that he could walk on water. And he showed his master, like, see, master, I can do this. And the master said, well, you just wasted 20 years of your life because you can take the ferry for 10 cents. And that's what it is, because it's a very dangerous path to go through the chakra system. See, for me, I knew nothing about chakras, only later on it started to happen. The first time I got in actually feeling the chakras was when I was with Sadhguru. I listened to a talk of him in Berlin, and I was like a little bit disappointed because I had heard exactly every single joke he made before on YouTube, like in the exact same intonation, like, okay, this was a waste of time. But there was like I was sitting next to the hallway, like the aisle in the middle, and near the end people would go down and crowd sit there. It's like, what's happening? It's like, oh, of course it's Bhakti, so he's going to come by and people want to touch his feet. So, being a Westerner, I was a little bit like, man. And then I saw him coming closer, and it's like, okay, just let it go, man, let it go. Open up. Might see what happens. You're here for a reason. It was the first time I experienced what happens in your body when the chakras open up, because he was at this distance, and suddenly it was like a stoplight. All three chakras, plexus, heart, throat opened. And I was just standing like this, like, okay, this is what cities are apparently. So he has a lot of power there. But again, it can be like a relief, You go to these places and then you go back into the real world with all your problems, save money to go back to your another fix from this guru, while everything you need to know is right here inside you. And once you're established in that, you can start playing with these things. But it's very difficult. I mean, for instance, you get clairvoyance, or you can tell the future. Well, good for you. Good luck trying to not make that into your new identity. If that pattern is still there, it will get lodged in so strongly that it's almost impossible to get rid of it. So that's my advice. First, really find out what you are in essence, and then those things will come. And they will go also. Imagine that you have built your identity into this, and it goes away. Now you have to fake it, even though you had those powers first. Now you have to fake it. So, whether your chakras from the root to the crown are open, that has nothing to do with end of suffering. And I think if you had to choose, would you rather be happy or be really cool and everyone love you, but you don't love yourself?
This question around when we were talking a few days ago. I was obviously curious about food and food and drink, and when you were moved to eat on your journey. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so like one of the last addictions we have is food. And once you started this journey, you realize how much like our entire society is surrounding food. Like it's crazy. And for me, someone asked me, why would you want to do this? Why would you want to live off prana? And the comparison I make is a love relationship. If you have an intimate relationship and there's two people and one of them or both of them need each other, you're fine. If both of them are able to stand on their both own 2 feet, and out of that love arises, that's the most beautiful thing. But otherwise you get this clingy feeling, and everyone just wants to get away when you feel that the other person is so clingy. I want a similar relationship with food. I don't want to need it. I don't want to be dependent on it. I want a love relationship with food where if that comes up, I want to experience that now, and that is what I do. So before coming here for, I think it was nine days, I didn't eat. I still drink though, water, hot gin. And then I felt the need, like, I really love the smell of those strawberries. They're really good. So I started eating 1 strawberry and a little bit of tomato, chopped tomato. It's an explosion in your mouth when you, even like if I do a long time not drinking water, 1 drop of water is like, oh, man, this is intense. So it's very important. So this friend of mine who is quite extreme, he doesn't have to eat and drink for many long periods, and he only sleeps an hour and a half per day because, well, a lot is needed for the digestion, and a lot is also needed for processing things that go on in your mind. And the more clingy the mind still is, the more needs to be processed at night. So you get a lot of time. Like I get 3 hours per day extra by not eating. Can you imagine, instead of 8 hours, sleeping 1.5 hours? So another friend of mine, she is like, yeah, this is great, because during the day I'm fully there for my daughter, and at night I have 8 hours for myself. So I started learning playing the piano, Spanish. It's an interesting process, because that the first year I started, they say that the cells in your body, they renew every once in a while. So your eyes, apparently those renew very fast, like every 6 weeks or something. But your backbone, like only every once a year or so. I don't know the exact details. But in this process, they are programmed to go back to the original cell, which is able to live off prana. When during conception, like the sperm cells come together, and it doesn't have a digestion system, but it's growing to become an embryo, but it has this ability to draw energy from the outside and grow out of this. Now, of course, like there's water in the uterus, but it has this ability to just absorb it. So in this process, the cells are renewed to the original cell, which is able to take up this prana. Now, when this renewing happens, it lets go of its karmic stored energies, which means shit happens in the outside world. A lot of shit happens. So everything you stored up and you held on to, it's letting go of, and it's like, oh my God, turmoil. So one of the things I apparently had a minor irritation with was when you have appointment with people and you set for a certain time and they don't show up. Pisses me off, or it used to a lot. So especially the days when I'm not eating, I feel this need to not just cleanse on the inside but also on the outside. So I start cleaning up my house and like I don't need this stuff, and then just put it on like a Facebook group to pick it up for free, or you can buy it for this and this amount. So I had for one evening a time slot of 2 hours in which 4 people would come by. None of them showed up. And only one, after I sent 3 messages, said, oh yeah, I forgot. So I was like boiling up. And it's like, okay, this is one of those moments, like something's been let go of, I should really be there. So I let it be, and I sat with it, and then the morning after, within an hour and a half, 4 different people picked it up. Now, if you resist in those moments, you reprogram your cells. So you get the karmic cycle going on and on and on. And you asked about the type of, how that goes with the food and cravings and things like that. So what also happens when you let go of these things is old conditioning, old things like I really love apple pie. And after 5 days of not eating, I was like, I need apple pie. So I bought an apple pie. It's like, okay, I'll just start with a really small slice. Oh, that's good, that's good. So I walk to the living room, and last piece, to the fridge, another piece. I ate the entire pie. I was so nauseous. So it's very important to go into these cravings because they are there for a reason, and you need to go through them. If you resist the craving again, you're programming your cells again, like, this is bad, I don't need this. Well, whatever you resist persists. So I've eaten a lot after I started living off prana. But after a while it just falls away because, it's wonderful to be with you guys, like during dinner. I see you enjoying the food. I don't feel the need to eat. And sometimes you're like, oh, that smells really good. And I was like, does my mind want this or does my stomach want this? And it's like almost always like, yeah, the mind. But after a while, you're on a holiday and you also want to enjoy. And like I said, I still lose a bit of weight. So every once in a while I was like, yeah, I used to be 10 kilos more heavy. So I see it as just a gradual process. Whenever the need comes up, I indulge in it. But it's always very important to stay aware. So I never say also when we talk about liberation, unlike some other people have heard, that it's always finished. You always have to be vigilant because you never know what's around the corner. It can always be something that triggers you and pulls you back in. But if the plate has become pretty clean, it's quite clear to see where there's a crumb. And if it's just all chaos, then it's like they're pretty difficult to see. So just clean. And I guess that's kind of a interesting analogy for everything that's happening also inside the body. Clean.
Just to go into that, so say you are downstairs practically and you see us eating and your mind takes over, how, because this happens to everyone I guess, you want to be non-judgmental and you go into judgment. Like how do you go then to the source of the pattern, or how do you go to that? Why is it coming up?
Yeah. No, I think actually that's something also very nice to do with your children. When they get into a tantrum or something, once they calm down a bit, try to, together with them, trace back what led to that happening. It's like, okay, so you feel now like this. So do you remember when it started up, when it came up? Like, yeah, this and this. Okay, and what did you feel at that moment? So this helps the self-inquiry process in a very natural way, and children will be able to learn very clearly to feel what's going on. So similarly, I do something like that. So I was like, what triggered me there? It's like, Is there something I don't want to think about? Just like when I sat on the couch with a phone there. So that process, it's still automatic. It happens a lot. So, and even if the story comes up, like starts, so because there's so much misconception about liberation. Like we I love Osho. Osho is so funny. He's like, your saints are not human. Like, they're not human. They don't have feelings. They don't have pain. Like, they're so cleansed. And he says, well, if I had to choose between the saints and the sinners, I'd rather be with the sinners. At least they're exuberant people. They're all the Hollywood people, the singers, the people that know how to party. But your saints are like dull and boring. But it's because we've, like, in our minds, made some sort of crazy avatars out of them. But like I said, Nisargadatta was, pretty intense guy. J. Krishnamurti, which was raised in almost in this way to become a perfect teacher, you could still piss him off and he would tell you. So you don't lose the humanity at all. So no need to judge yourself when all these things come up. So let me see what the time. is. Oh. 20 minutes and we have food. Oh.
Does your teacher have a YouTube channel?
I don't have teacher. Oh, you mean the Pranic liver? Yeah, Pranic living. Yeah. But he changed it to Dutch. But he has English videos also. He's called Brahma Manor. I'll write it down for you.
Do you feel there's a next stage in your life? I mean, I feel like you're pretty in balance, if I can say it right. Do you feel there's a next step for you, or how do you see that now? I mean, you told us not to be in the future or in the past, but do you feel like you're evolving to something else?
Yeah, it's funny. So there's nothing wrong with the future and the past, as long as it's not coming from a resistance to what is. So your resistance to what is happening now, that's creating the suffering. So, I used to do like Wim Hof method, like sitting in ice. It's a beautiful way of the only way you survive an ice bath is by completely allowing it to be and be with the sensation. If you resist it, you become like tense and it doesn't work. So it's complete acceptance of what is. Out of that space, you can choose whatever you want to do. You say, okay, I want to get out of the ice bath. Fine, then you go out. So if you say what's next, I feel almost like since the last seeking energy has dropped, a good friend of mine who had like similar falling away of self instances, he's like, how is it now for you? Like, has as much changed? But it has become, for me, it's very gradual, so it's not that, but it's like almost like a slapstick movie. It's like, so funny, like, oh yeah, it's really cool. It feels like I'm really inside here, and there's like this other person I'm talking to, and it's like every once in a while that comes up and like so hilarious. But it's nice to be able to be like in the story, out of the story, instead of just completely in the story and drowning, or completely out of the story, which is like what I said when you're totally in the Shiva aspect. And so I like the both elements. And I feel now, I think that's also related to this trip, now I can dive in these crazy cities and we're going to find out how they levitated stones. We're going to try it ourselves. Yeah, whatever comes, but I don't know if it's that, but we're living in such an interesting time And I just want to make this even more of a beautiful playground than it already is. If there's anything, yeah. So I told you that I didn't do any psychedelics or anything, but a few months ago I had the opportunity to do Choco Bliss, which is still of Simon, and it was funny. Nothing new was learned, but it was seen in such a beautiful way. Do you know like the 52 card playing deck? Like, and you have the Joker in it, right? But it's not the Joker like the movie, but it's more like the guy who entertained the king. Yeah. And I saw it like when you have those disco balls, and you're in the disco and there's like fog and there's a light hitting it, and then you see all the beams, right? Well, I saw more like a disco ball, and in the middle there was a light, and you saw all those beams coming out, and it was like, you are one of those beams, and only a few of those beams look back. It's like, we're pretending to be different, and we can wink to others like, you know what the deal is, what's up, but don't ruin the fun for the other people, because it's nice to think that you're separated or that you're. And this Joker in the normal playing card deck it can be anything, so it can be good or bad. So in this, you can embody whatever life wants you to be. You can be the evil one or the good one, because they're both necessary for this play to have this richness and this beauty. And in that sense, it was so clear that it almost felt I was, no, not almost. In the trip, I was holding an angel and a devil, and we were dancing with the three of us, because we were creating this beautiful divine comedy. That is what the true meaning, I feel, of this Joker is. When you see that it's just a joke.
So I was thinking about when you talked about pranic living, and it's a way of experimenting. How much do we need? Can we liberate ourselves from food or things like that? And then, but if you take it to the extreme, there are still some things we cannot liberate from. Like, for example, you could not. I haven't heard about someone who does not live without oxygen. Like, say, okay, I'm going to decide I'm not going to breathe anymore. I haven't heard anyone doing that. So there's, on the spectrum, there's like some things you can experiment with, but others not, and you're still like bound to that. So where would you say it's like?
I had this question, and I asked my friend who taught me. It's like, well, if this is not needed, why would you need to breathe? He said, good question. So I sat for 20 minutes at the bottom of a pool. You don't.
What?
Well, he's an extreme case. No, but what happened to him was my story pales in comparison. He has died 3 times in one night, was resuscitated by his wife 3 times, and he merged 3 times with the divine. And ever since he knows everyone's story, so he can tell the entire book of someone. Sometimes he says, it's going to be an interesting year for you. But he doesn't share more. It's like he doesn't want to ruin the story. So we've heard of people in India that bury themselves and for 3 days, and so they don't need to breathe, apparently. So it is possible. Just don't try it at home.
It's really cool to be in this room with everybody, because everybody's seeking it on this path, and it's cool to see all of you where everyone's at, and we're all on our way back. But just remember, at some point, we were all there, and we were working really hard to get away from it and to get here too. And it ebbs and it flows and it goes away from itself and it comes back to itself, and it's all natural and it's all organic. And you kind of tuned me into that.
maybe nice to end. There's often certain words, certain sentences that are said that kind of show that the understanding isn't complete yet, or it's just a matter of speaking. And one is often said is, we have consciousness, we don't. We are consciousness. And in consciousness, bodies arise, seemingly. Not physical, real, because that would make it different from the consciousness itself. You and life are not two. There's simply this in which God expresses itself. And that seems to be from a vantage point of view. But there's not the body has consciousness. I mean, have you ever experienced a body without consciousness? No, the substratum, the main element, the main ingredient out of which everything is made, is consciousness, which is knowing. If we dive into this story again of the dream, or when I went into, okay, what is the essence of the sound when you close your eyes? It's happening here. What do you really know about this sound? Or better said, what do you really know about this glass? You say, I see a glass. Well, do you? Maybe it's like a Fata Morgana. Maybe you're having a trip and you're imagining it. Whether it's a Fata Morgana or you're imagining it, or it's a dream, it still is made out of the same essence, namely consciousness, knowing, vibrating in a certain way. Consciousness is the base element for anything. So it's not, I have a body and somehow consciousness comes into it. No, consciousness has this ability to allow for anything, Shiva, masculine, and become and express itself in anything, Shakti, the feminine. So, whenever you hear someone say the body has consciousness, dive into that and realize that it's the other way around, because you've never experienced a body without consciousness.